Mastering energy calibration. Have you ever watched someone just walk into a space and almost instantly you feel the entire atmosphere of the room shift? And it's not because they were the loudest person there, but because they understood something fundamental that honestly most people completely miss. Well, today, in this explainer, we're unpacking a really powerful communication framework. We're going to look at exactly how the most influential people out there orchestrate the emotional momentum of a room.
Think about it for a second. We've all had that exact moment, right? You walk into a meeting room, and before a single word is even spoken, you instantly sense this invisible wall of tension. Or, on the flip side, maybe you join a team huddle, and there's just this sudden, undeniable momentum that makes you feel totally energized. A lot of us just brush this off as a gut feeling or catching good vibes. But according to our source material, this isn't magic. It's actually hard data. It's broadcasting on a frequency that you can literally learn to read.
So let's ground this abstract feeling into a concrete skill. The sources define this as energy calibration. As we briefly touched on when discussing the 4 channels of communication, reading energy shifts, this calibration, is considered the absolute most advanced skill in emotional intelligence. It's the ability to sense the overall emotional atmosphere that people unconsciously create around them. Because the truth is, people leak their emotions. Even when they're controlling their face or their posture, their internal state is radiating outward. Advanced calibrators don't just listen to the words being said, they are actively reading this invisible atmosphere.
To systematically recognize these energy shifts in a room, you should focus on 4 specific strategies. Strategy 1, the internal mirror, monitoring your own emotional response.
Now, this might sound a little counterintuitive, but to read a room accurately, you actually have to start by looking inward. Your own body, your own nervous system, those are your most reliable instruments. Why? Well, because emotions are highly contagious. It's just a biological reality driven by our nervous systems. We unconsciously mirror the states of the people around us. So the most reliable way to start reading a room's energy is to pay close attention to how you suddenly feel when you walk in. If you find yourself unexpectedly shifting from totally calm to anxious, or maybe from tired to surprisingly confident and energized, your internal emotional response is very likely reflecting the unconscious energy the group is projecting.
Think of your internal emotional response as hard data broadcasting the prevailing tone of the room. If your internal response is that you suddenly feel pumped up and optimistic, the likely group energy is a state of positive momentum and alignment. But if you walk in and feel unexpectedly unsettled, heavy, or just drained, you are likely picking up on underlying anxiety or some hidden conflict within that group. You're basically acting like an emotional sponge. The trick here is to observe this absorption consciously rather than just falling victim to it.
Moving right along to strategy 2, group momentum, tracking the flow of interaction.
Okay, so now we're shifting from your internal feelings to tracking the outward flow. You have to actively observe the flow of the interaction. You can sense an energy shift by noticing whether a meeting suddenly gains positive momentum. Ideas are flowing, people are leaning in, the tempo is crisp. Conversely, watch out for flagging energy. That's when responses become sluggish and the collective energy begins dropping, and the room just feels like it's wading through molasses. Recognizing these shifts in real time is crucial because it allows you to step in before a meeting completely stalls out.
Which brings us to strategy 3, spotting the unspoken. Looking for silent dissent.
In any group setting, the most important communication is often what isn't happening out loud. You've got to pay attention to the unspoken dynamics. Advanced calibrators can sense when someone in a group is silently disagreeing, even if that person hasn't actually spoken up or said a single word. Watch for subtle physical withdrawals, like someone suddenly leaning back or crossing their arms when a proposal is made. Watch for those tiny micro-hesitations before they nod, or a distinct lack of verbal agreement from key stakeholders while everyone else is enthusiastically saying yes. These are massive red flags that the room's energy is fractured, regardless of how polite everyone is pretending to be.
And our final diagnostic tool is strategy 4, the false agreement, differentiating consensus from compliance.
This right here, this is the ultimate test of your calibration skills. You must learn to detect when an apparent agreement in the room is genuine versus when it's actually just compliance masquerading as agreement. Genuine consensus feels light, it's authentic and shared. People are actively participating in the yes. Compliance, on the other hand, feels heavy. It happens when people agree because they're pressured, maybe intimidated, or honestly just fatigued by a super long meeting. If you push forward on mere compliance, you are going to face massive resistance during execution. Spotting this difference, that is a master-level leadership trait.
All right, let's talk about stepping into emotional leadership, shifting the room's momentum.
So up until now, we've really just been zooming in to read the room. But true emotional intelligence requires leading out by taking responsibility for the group's emotional outcome. Whenever you enter a group setting, there's typically a prevailing emotional tone that everyone is unconsciously matching. Imagine you recognize an unproductive energy in the room. Is the space dominated by anxiety over a looming deadline? Or maybe the team is stuck in this thick mud of analysis paralysis, totally unable to make a decision. When you spot this, you have a choice. You can either succumb to the contagion and become anxious and paralyzed yourself, or you can step up and lead.
By using these techniques to recognize the room's energy, you can actually step into a position of emotional leadership. As an emotional leader, you don't just absorb the room's energy, you intentionally shift it toward a better outcome. If you notice the group's energy is unproductive, you can consciously introduce a different, more effective emotional tone to shift the group's momentum. If the room is paralyzed, you bring decisive energy. If the room is frantic, you bring grounded, calm reflection. You literally become the thermostat, not the thermometer.
So let's walk through these simple, empowering steps to show how anyone can step into this position of calm, grounded emotional leadership. Step 1. Recognize the prevailing tone using your internal mirror and observation skills. Step 2. Strategically choose a productive emotion. Ask yourself, what does this room actually need right now to succeed? And step 3. Consciously introduce that new momentum. Change your posture, alter your speaking pace, maybe ask a really good reframing question, and inject the necessary energy right into the space. The group's mirror neurons will naturally begin to follow your lead.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. How will you consciously influence the emotional tone of your next group setting? You now know that the energy in a room isn't just something happening to you, it's something you can read, calibrate, and ultimately lead. So the next time you walk through a door, just remember that the invisible currents of that room are yours to shape. What kind of energy will you choose to create?